Hi everybody, welcome to Aimee Nolte Music. Today I'd like to let you know about one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from anybody. It's advice that has kept me going, kept me involved in music, and I think helped me to be happy and helped me to keep progressing and to be successful somewhat. It's about the time that I was maybe a sophomore in college, and one of the piano players who was graduating, who I admired quite a bit. It was a girl. She was the pianist for the main big band, and I thought she was really good. And I always thought that she was just really tasty and classy, and had good ears and beautiful technique and everything. It's some advice that she gave me when she graduated, and I took her spot. And she and I had never really even talked. She was always just kind of this older girl that I thought was pretty cool, and I didn't really know her. She was kind of like another level, like out of my league or something. I didn't even try to talk to her, but I remember that she just came up to me. It was like she knew that she was leaving. She was graduating, and maybe she wouldn't be coming back for a while, and she said, "Aimee, come here for a second." And she pulled me into the corner and she looked me dead in the eyes. "I have to tell you that the most important thing I've learned is to take gigs. You're gonna learn more by playing with people in live situations than you're ever gonna learn practicing in a practice room. Every gig that comes your way, if you can take it, take it. No matter what style it is, no matter if you think it's beneath you, if you think it's too challenging, take every gig." And I was like, "Okay." And she goes, "You got it? You understand?" And I said, "Yeah, I got it." And she goes, "All right." And then she left. It was like a dream or something. But I didn't forget it. She really said it with some intensity. You're not going to forget that. And then life started happening to me. I got married. I got married while I was still in school, really young, 19. It's probably a little too young, kids, but it's worked out for me. And finished school. Soon after I finished school, I got pregnant. Gonna have my first little baby. And my husband and I had to kind of reassess things and talk about stuff. He was still in school. He had a part-time job. I was teaching. I had like 15 students at the time, trying to help out with the bills. And I, started to get a tummy. But I was so lucky because all of the guys that I played with, they were just so happy for me that I was going to have a little baby. And all the way until I was like 9 months pregnant, I gigged. Just gig all the time with a pregnant belly, and they didn't care. And my husband was just happy for me to get out and play. So I followed her advice all through that. So after I had Miles, then we moved to New York City. My husband got a job through Teach for America, teaching 7th and 8th grade history and English in IS 184 in the South Bronx. We lived in Washington Heights, and we lived in Inwood. It was just a totally different experience for us. It was amazing. I loved it. But for a little while, I just took care of my Miles. But as soon as I could, I found out where the jam sessions were, and I went to go hear music. So we'd put him to bed, and I would take off, hop on the train and ride downtown and go to these jam sessions. I'd go hang out at Smalls. There was another place called Cleopatra's Needle that I hung out at a lot because there was a really good piano player there named Eric Lewis who would come in about 1 a.m. and just take over. He was so fun to listen to. And I couldn't stay out very long because it's New York and it's nighttime and I lived in a dangerous neighborhood, but I went to hear music, and then from the jam sessions I started getting gigs. I would sit in and hand out my business card and then get gigs. And it was a little bit difficult to take these gigs because I had a baby at home and a husband who was working, but he always supported me. So All the gigs I could take in New York City, I took. But mostly, I'm just a stay-at-home mom. The other thing I did was that was the time in my life where I started transcribing. So I transcribed for people, and they would write to me and send me a CD, and I would transcribe and then send them back the written music and charge them. And so I always just try to, you know, even if I couldn't take gigs as much, or maybe I wasn't even getting gigs that much back then, I tried to do something to sharpen my skills. But she was right. I mean, I learned quite a bit from those transcriptions, but not nearly as much as I learned when I actually went out on a gig. You really learn things in the moment on a gig. You learn things that you couldn't predict otherwise. Like if I'm going to play a 5/7 chord and I decide to voice it with a 9 and a 13, and the saxophone player plays what is clearly an altered sound, and I've already played the 9 and the 13, I've done him a disservice. So you learn little things, like when you get to that 5 chord, let the saxophone player play some notes before you stab your chord. Things like that. You can't learn just over there. You gotta be out there with people. You learn how to trade fours. You learn how to comp while a bass player solos. Maybe you comp during the bass player's solo, and afterward the bass player says, you were a little muddy in your comping. You might want to be a little brighter, a little higher. Cool. You got to learn things from people like that, and on the gig is the best way to do it. I had a really other cool piece of advice that goes right along with this. Right. So while I was in New York, 2 years later, I had another baby. Ella was born, and maybe only like a month after she was born, we took this trip, and we were on an airplane, and I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence because it's pretty crazy that it happened. Ella and I were sitting in a seat, and a lady came and she said, "Is this seat taken?" And she took the middle seat right next to me, and she had a Newport Jazz Festival t-shirt on, and I said, are you a jazz musician? And she says, well, yes. And I said, so am I. And she goes, oh, maybe you've heard of me. And I was like, tell me. And then she said, my name's Joanne Brackeen. And Joanne Brackeen and I got to be good friends on that plane flight. I think I was on that trip alone, and so I just had Ella, and my husband, had Miles somewhere else. But I told her about myself, and I told her about how hard it was to practice. She was like, well, are you practicing? Are you gigging? And I said, well, not so much right now. It's really hard for me to practice with my new baby and my 2-year-old. And she said, dear, I'm going to tell you something. I've raised 4 children of my own. I think she said 4, might have been 5. And I always practiced. I was like, really? She said, you find a way. She goes, if you love music, you find a way. She said, you can have children and they don't have to slow you down much. So that inspired me to practice even harder than I was. And the coolest thing was when we got to where we were going, I think I was going to visit my in-laws in Utah. Joanne Brackeen had a gig there, and she invited me, and I got to come sit in with her, and we played a duet. So great advice from 2 women that really helped me. It helped me find confidence. For one thing, I just took it. I took what they said right at face value and decided that I was going to do my very best to take their advice completely. So I did. Any gig that ever came my way, I had 2 more kids, right? So every time after I had a kid, I had to take a little bit of time off, just a little bit. But then as soon as I could, I got right back into it. Good motivation to lose weight every time too. And I would take whatever gigs came my way, whether it was accompanying somebody, accompanying a choir, playing for a dance class, bar mitzvahs, weddings, anything. Solo gigs, trio gigs, duo gigs, quartet gigs, big band gigs. I just took them. Anytime that I was low on gigs, I would just go to a jam session. Just find a jam session, bring your business card, play some tunes, and usually I get pretty lucky and somebody would want my card, and a lot of times I end up with a gig from a jam session. But it's right. Gigs also make you prepare. If you know that you've got to fill 3 hours and you've got to come up with the set lists, you're going to do some serious practicing to get ready for that gig. You're going to come up with all the songs, you're going to put them in your keys, you're going to make sure you know them, that you've memorized the words, that you've memorized the changes. If you have to accompany, if you have to go be the pianist for a sing-along at Christmas time, you're going to make sure that you learned a lot of Christmas songs. You're going to put them in keys for singers and make sure that you know the tricky changes before they come up. Chestnuts roasting on an open fire, it's a tricky tune. Whatever it is, whatever gig comes your way, you've got to prepare for it. There's a lot in that, a lot of practice time that happens in that. And then you learn things while you're on the gig. So very, very important advice from 2 women that I admire and respect. And I'm so glad that they took the time to tell me those things. And I'm taking the time to tell you right now because it's important to play with people. Don't forget it. Anytime you get a chance, go ahead and do it. Now, you do want to make sure that you're making some money. You have to take into account what time of life you're in. If you're in a position where you can afford to play some free gigs because you think it'll help you, I guess you can do that. But I also never played for free. Always make sure that you charge. If you want to help out a friend, that's a good idea. But if somebody's hiring you, you charge what you're worth. It's different in all cities. You know, rural areas, you're probably not going to get paid as much as you will in cities. And I don't know, different countries are going to be different. But make sure and know the going rate around the place where you live and charge them what you're worth. Don't be afraid to ask for the money when the gig is over. Sometimes you get people that are not excited about paying you after the gig. But do that for me, okay? Take all the gigs that you can take. Get out there and make some money. Make yourself practice harder. Make yourself listen to the people around you. Learning from musicians, learning from situations. It's going to make you a better musician. Thanks for watching Aimee Nolte Music. I'll see you next time.